Welcome to video 4. In video 4 we're going to, well, so far we have transferred the data in the Docuscope tool into a spreadsheet, a CSV file, and that's portable because we can then open that CSV file in a statistical package, in this case Minitab. So we're going to open Minitab, in this case Minitab 18, and we're going to open under File, and then we need to look for our data. So wherever it is in your desktop, I have it here under monotheism, and we're going to open just the cluster level. And so just hit OK, and now all of that data that we've had before in Docuscope is now transferred. You can see how Docuscope, when we exported frequency, is actually converts now all of the words and phrases of the Bible and the Quran into numbers that we can then calculate. Every row here happens to be a verse of the Quran, and now we can see, we'll get into verses of the Bible here too. See, there's, get to 114 verses of the Quran. And then as soon as we hit 114, we'll start going into, now we're into the New Testament, and now we're into the Old Testament. And what we want to confirm is our hypotheses, or try to confirm, that the Quran is truly more confident as a statement and also more interactive. So what we're going to do is, under statistics, we're going to do an ANOVA test, a one-way ANOVA, and we're going to look at the response. The response variable is going to be first confidence, high confidence. So it's going to be confidence high. There's also hedged and low confidence. We don't want that. We just want high confidence. We're going to be looking at the group variable. The group variable is whether it's the New Testament, the Old Testament, or the Quran. So we want to see if the confidence, high confidence, truly is distributed more in the Quran than in the other Bible offerings. We're also going to do a comparison here called Tukey, because Tukey will be definitive as to whether there's a statistically significant difference. And then we're going to hit OK. And you can see, first it gives us a bar chart, and you can see that the bar is considerably higher in terms of high confidence for the Quran. You know, that the actual mean frequency for any Quran verse is 1.5 of high confidence. The mean is 1.53 actually, and that simply means that out of every 100 words on average, 1.5 in the Quran is highly confident. But it is the voice of God, so whereas the New Testament and Old Testament, much lower confidence levels, because apparently written by men, but you see the average confidence level is like 0.5, one whole frequency level less, and Old Testament even less high confidence, a mean of 1.57. But to know if that's really confident, we look at Tukey, and the Tukey test says that if in fact a confidence interval, which these things are, if they cross 0, you don't have statistical significance. So it turns out that there's no statistical significance between the Old Testament and the New Testament in terms of high confidence, because this line crosses 0. But notice that between the New Testament and the Quran and the Old Testament and the Quran, very significantly different. And we can actually see, if we go to the if we then go to the what's called the session window, it will tell us that the p-value, the chances that they are different, the chances that confidence high is greater in the Quran than in the other Bibles, 0, 0, 0. In other words, there is no chance no chance whatsoever that the Quran is not more highly confident than the other two. And if we actually look at Tukey pairwise comparisons and go down here further, we see that the grouping information using the Tukey method of 95% confidence intervals, you can see that means that do not share a letter are significantly different. So The Quran, which has a mean of 1.5 and high confidence, is in Group A, and the Bibles are listed in Group B. So we know that these are more confident. We're going to do now the same with interactivity. So we're going to go back and do one-way ANOVA again, but now with interactivity. And so here's interactive, and we still have Tukey selected, so that's good. So we're going to go back, and we can also see, yes, the Quran is higher in interactivity. So the visualization we saw in DocuScope holds up statistically, and if we look at the pairwise comparisons, you can see again that the Quran is statistically more significant. Now if we want to get really interesting, we can actually make a graph of this, and we can make a graph under scatter plots. Under graph scatter plots, we hit with groups, and we hit OK. And then the x variable, we could make high confidence. Put in the x variable, and then the y variable, we can hit interactivity. Okay, and then the grouping variable is going to be the group, and we can let it rip and see what happens. Okay, now it's interesting because it's not a normal distribution, so it's still skewed quite right. But the point is that the green is the Old Testament, and you can see the Old Testament is not very interactive, not a lot of direct talking of God to man. A lot of men talking about God, but not a lot of direct talking from God to men. I'm sure there's some with Moses, but it's a very small part of the Hebrew Bible. And to be truthful, a lot of the Quran verses also don't have a lot of interactivity, but everything high in the plane here, everything high in interactivity in a Bible verse comes from the Quran. In other words, if it's in this top quadrant, if it's interactive, it's the Quran. Okay? No, because we only see blue. The Quran is the blue dots, and we only see the Quran in the high part of this region, which is high in interactivity. We can actually click on these guys, and using the brush feature, we can figure out, using the brush feature in Minitab, we can actually figure out which one it is. So that happens to be row 94. And if we actually go to the window file and look at the, okay, if we go back here and look at row 94, it will mark it for us, and it will tell us that, oh, row 94 is verse 94 of the Quran. So that is very interactive. If we look at high confidence, the same thing, although even at small levels, the blues dominate to the right of confidence high. So a lot of the average high confidence of the Quran verses, not a lot higher, but very consistently higher than the New and Old Testament. But then you have some striking, very striking verses, like verse 102 in the Quran, which is so high confident, it's unbelievable. So we'll leave it at here because we're not going to use this representation. We're going to go back to DocuScope, but we've gone now to Minitab in order to confirm, and we have confirmed with a high degree of confidence that the Quran is more highly confident and also more interactive than the Bibles. We're going to stop.